The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Sarah Martinez carefully disassembled her M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. Her hands moved with practiced precision, each component placed exactly where it belonged on the cleaning mat. The weapon had served her well during the last mission, but something felt different about it now. Something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Sarah had been a Navy SEAL sniper for 8 years, one of only a handful of women to earn the prestigious trident. Her reputation for accuracy was legendary among her unit. Teammates often joked that she could thread a needle at 1,000 yards, but Sarah never bragged about her skills. She let her rifle do the talking. The cleaning ritual was sacred to her. Every morning after a mission, she would strip down her weapon completely, inspect every part, and clean it until it gleamed like new. This wasn't just maintenance. It was meditation. The repetitive motions calmed her mind and helped her process whatever had happened in the field. Today felt different, though. Yesterday's mission in the mountains of Afghanistan had been routine reconnaissance, or so she thought. Her team had positioned themselves on a high ridge overlooking a suspected Taliban compound. Sarah's job was to provide overwatch while her teammates gathered intelligence from a safe distance. The compound had been quiet all morning. Through her scope, Sarah watched the normal activities of daily life. Children played in the dusty courtyard while women hung laundry on makeshift lines. It looked peaceful enough, but intelligence suggested otherwise. Weapons were supposedly being stored in the main building, and high-value targets were expected to arrive that evening. Around noon, her spotter Jake had whispered something that made her blood run cold. "Sarah, you see that guy by the well? The one in the blue shirt?" She adjusted her scope and found the target. A man in his 30s, tall and lean with a distinctive scar running down his left cheek. "That's Hassan al-Rashid," Jake continued. "He's been on our most wanted list for 2 years. Intel says he's responsible for at least 12 IED attacks." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but her breathing remained steady. This was what she had trained for. Hassan was approximately 800 meters away, well within her effective range. The wind was minimal, and she had a clear line of sight. Her finger moved to the trigger guard, but she waited for orders. The radio crackled to life. Command had confirmed the target identification. Hassan al-Rashid was indeed in their sights, and he was armed. Intelligence indicated he was planning another attack that could kill dozens of innocent people. The order came through clearly. "Take the shot when ready." Sarah adjusted her position slightly, checking her breathing and heart rate. Everything had to be perfect. She calculated the distance again, accounted for the slight crosswind, and elevated her aim just a fraction. Through her scope, she could see Hassan clearly as he moved toward a group of other men near the compound's main entrance. The shot felt different when she took it. Usually there was a satisfying crack, followed by the immediate confirmation of impact. This time something seemed off. The recoil felt normal, the sound was right, but when she looked through her scope again, Hassan was down, but he was much further away than she had initially calculated. Jake was already on the radio, calling in the successful hit, but Sarah was staring through her scope in confusion. The distance looked wrong. Everything looked wrong. The compound seemed smaller. The people looked tiny, and the entire perspective had shifted in a way that didn't make sense. "Jake," she whispered. "Something's not right. Check the range again." Jake pulled out his laser rangefinder and aimed it at the compound. The device took several seconds to calculate, which was unusual for such a clear target. When the number appeared on the display, Jake's face went white. "Sarah, this can't be right." "Check it again." Sarah took the rangefinder and aimed it herself at the exact spot where Hassan had fallen. The device worked perfectly, giving her a clear digital readout that made her stomach drop. The number staring back at her was impossible. 2,940 meters, nearly 3,000 meters. Almost 2 miles. No one could make that shot. Not with standard equipment, not under normal circumstances. The effective range of her M2010 was impressive, but 2,940 meters was beyond anything she had ever attempted or even imagined possible. "That has to be wrong," Jake muttered, taking the rangefinder back and checking it again. "Maybe there's interference or the device is malfunctioning." But every measurement came back the same. 2,140 meters. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Had they miscalculated their own position? Had they moved during the night without realizing it? But she remembered setting up their hide site, remembered the careful calculations they had done the evening before. Their position had been logged and confirmed. 800 meters, not 3,000. The radio buzzed with congratulations from command. The mission was a success. Hassan al-Rashid was confirmed dead, and the team was cleared to return to base. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just happened. Something that defied everything she knew about ballistics, physics, and the limitations of her equipment. As they packed up their gear and prepared to move out, Jake kept shaking his head. "Sarah, I've been spotting for snipers for 12 years. I've seen some incredible shots, but what you just did? That's not humanly possible. That's not even physically possible with that rifle and that ammunition." Sarah said nothing as she carefully packed her M2010 back into its case. The weapon felt heavier somehow, as if it had absorbed some of the impossibility of what had just occurred. She had made the shot of a lifetime, possibly the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. But instead of feeling proud, she felt confused and slightly afraid. The helicopter ride back to base was quiet. Sarah stared out the window at the rugged Afghan landscape below, her mind turning over the morning's events again and again. 40 meters. The number burned in her mind like a brand. Now sitting in the early morning light with her rifle completely disassembled before her, Sarah was looking for answers. Every part of the weapon appeared normal. The barrel showed the expected wear patterns, the bolt operated smoothly, and the scope was perfectly calibrated. Nothing suggested that this rifle was anything other than a standard-issue M2010 enhanced sniper rifle. But Sarah knew what she had seen, what she had done, and what the rangefinder had told them. Somehow, impossibly, she had made a shot that should have been beyond the reach of any sniper who had ever lived. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she continued examining each component of her M2010. She had been awake most of the night, replaying the impossible shot over and over in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. How had the bullet maintained its trajectory over such an extreme distance? How had it retained enough energy to be lethal? Most importantly, how had she instinctively known where to aim? The armory was quiet at this early hour. Most of the other SEALs were still sleeping off the previous day's mission, but Sarah couldn't rest. She needed answers, and those answers had to be somewhere in this rifle. She picked up the barrel and held it up to the light, examining the rifling through a magnifying glass. Everything appeared standard, but then again, she wasn't sure what she was looking for. "Martinez, you're up early." The voice belonged to Chief Petty Officer David Burke, the unit's senior sniper instructor. Burke was a legend in the special operations community, with over 20 years of experience and more confirmed kills than anyone wanted to count. If anyone could help her understand what had happened, it would be him. "Chief, I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep an open mind," Sarah said, not looking up from her rifle. "What's the longest confirmed sniper kill you've ever heard of?" Burke pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "Well, officially it's around 3,540 meters. A Canadian sniper made that shot in Iraq a few years back. Took him several attempts, perfect conditions, and a lot of luck. Unofficially, there are rumors of longer shots, but nothing confirmed." "Why do you ask?" Sarah finally looked up from her rifle. "Because I think I made a 2,940-meter shot yesterday, and I have no idea how it's possible." Burke's expression shifted from casual interest to serious concern. "Sarah, that's not something to joke about. A shot like that would require perfect atmospheric conditions, specialized ammunition, and mathematical calculations that would take a computer to figure out. Even then, the margin for error would be enormous." "I'm not joking, Chief." Jake confirmed the distance with the rangefinder. Multiple readings all the same. 240 meters. Sarah handed him the after-action report that Jake had filed. Burke read through it carefully, his frown deepening with each line. "According to this, you engaged a target at what you believed was 800 meters. Standard procedure, textbook shot, but the actual distance was measured at nearly 3,000 meters. Burke set the report down and looked at Sarah intently. "There are only two explanations here. Either your equipment malfunctioned or something very unusual happened out there." Sarah nodded toward her disassembled rifle. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Everything looks normal, but normal doesn't explain what happened." Burke stood up and walked over to a locked cabinet, retrieving a digital caliper and several other precision measuring instruments. "Let's check everything systematically. Barrel length, chamber dimensions, rifling twist rate. If there's something different about this rifle, we'll find it. For the next 2 hours, They measured every component of Sarah's M2010. Burke's expertise was evident as he checked tolerances and specifications against the manufacturer's standards. Sarah watched and learned, hoping that some obvious modification or defect would reveal itself. But as the morning progressed, it became clear that her rifle was completely standard in every measurable way. "Sarah, this weapon is factory spec in every detail. There's nothing here that would explain an extended range capability," Burke said, reassembling the rifle with practiced efficiency, "which brings us to the ammunition. What were you shooting?" Sarah retrieved the remaining rounds from her gear locker. Federal Gold Medal Match 175-grain Sierra Match King bullets. Standard issue for precision shooting. Burke examined the cartridges carefully, measuring the overall length and checking the bullet seating depth. Again, everything appeared normal. "Chief, there's something else," Sarah said quietly. "When I took the shot, it felt different. Not the recoil or the sound, but the way I aimed. I didn't do the usual calculations for wind and drop. I just knew where to point the rifle. It was like instinct, but stronger than any instinct I've ever had." Burke set down the ammunition and studied Sarah's face. "That's interesting. You know, there are stories in the sniper community about shooters who seem to have an almost supernatural connection with their rifles. Most people dismiss them as legends or exaggerations, but I've seen some things in my career that were hard to explain." He walked over to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "These are incident reports from the past 50 years. Unusual shooting incidents, unexplained accuracy, shots that shouldn't have been possible. Most of them were buried or classified, but I've been collecting them for years." Sarah opened the folder and began reading. The reports were fascinating and disturbing in equal measure. A Marine sniper in Vietnam who made a 1-800-meter shot with iron sights. A British soldier in the Falklands who hit a target he couldn't even see clearly. A Delta Force operator who made 3 impossible shots in a single engagement, each one defying ballistic physics. "What connects all these incidents?" Sarah asked, flipping through the pages. "That's what I've been trying to figure out for years," Burke replied. "Different shooters, different weapons, different locations and time periods. But they all share certain characteristics. The shooters were all highly trained professionals. They all described the same intuitive aiming process you mentioned. And in every case, the rifle appeared completely normal upon inspection." Sarah found a report dated just 5 years earlier. A Navy SEAL sniper in Afghanistan had made a series of shots that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The shooter, whose name was redacted, described the experience in terms very similar to what Sarah had felt. The rifle was tested extensively afterward, but no modifications or defects were found. "Chief, this shooter in Afghanistan, do you know who it was?" Burke's expression became guarded. "That's classified information, Sarah, but I can tell you that the shooter is no longer in active service. After that incident, he requested a transfer to a non-combat role and eventually left the Navy altogether." "What happened to him? Why did he leave?" According to his file, he became convinced that something was fundamentally wrong with what had happened. He couldn't accept that he had made those shots without understanding how or why. It affected his confidence, his ability to function as a sniper. Eventually, it affected his mental health. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying that making an impossible shot drove him crazy?" "I'm saying that not understanding how you did something extraordinary can be more disturbing than never doing it at all," Burke replied carefully. "The human mind needs explanations for unusual events. When we can't find logical explanations, we start to doubt our own perceptions and abilities." Sarah closed the folder and looked at her reassembled rifle. "So what do I do? Pretend it never happened? Report it as equipment malfunction?" "That's your decision to make," Burke said. "But I'd recommend documenting everything while it's fresh in your memory. Write down every detail of what you experienced, what you felt, what you observed. If this happens again, we'll want to compare notes." "If it happens again?" Sarah hadn't considered that possibility. "Chief, do you think it will happen again?" Burke was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, I've been studying these incidents for years and I've noticed a pattern. Once a shooter experiences this phenomenon, it rarely happens just once. Whatever causes, it seems to be triggered by extreme stress, life or death situations, and the absolute need to make an impossible shot." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. "So you think there will be other situations where I might need to make shots like this?" "I think," Burke said carefully, "that you should be prepared for the possibility. And more importantly, you should be prepared for the psychological impact of being able to do something that shouldn't be possible. As Sarah packed up her rifle and prepared to leave the armory, Burke called out to her, "Sarah, one more thing. Whatever you decide to do about this, be careful who you talk to about it. There are people in the military and intelligence communities who are very interested in shooters like you. Not all of their intentions are necessarily in your best interest." 3 weeks passed before Sarah's next mission, and the impossible shot haunted her every waking moment. She had followed Chief Burke's advice and documented everything she could remember, filling pages with details about the temperature, humidity, wind conditions, her mental state, and most importantly, that strange intuitive feeling that had guided her aim. But writing it down hadn't made it feel any more real or any less disturbing. The nightmares started during the second week. Sarah would dream that she was back on that ridge, but instead of one target, there were dozens. Each shot she took traveled impossible distances, curving through the air like guided missiles. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her hands shaking as if she had actually been firing her rifle. Her team noticed the change. During training exercises, Sarah's normally perfect accuracy became erratic. Sometimes she would miss targets at ranges she could normally hit blindfolded. Other times she would hit targets that should have been beyond her rifle's effective range. Jake, her spotter, grew increasingly concerned. "Sarah, what's going on with you?" Jake asked after a particularly bizarre training session. "Yesterday you missed a 600-meter target 3 times in a row, and today you hit a 200-meter target on your first shot in conditions that should have made it impossible." Sarah couldn't tell him the truth. How could she explain that she was starting to doubt everything she thought she knew about shooting? That sometimes when she looked through her scope, distances seemed to shift and change? That her rifle felt different in her hands, heavier and lighter at the same time? "I'm just working through some technique issues," she lied. "It'll sort itself out," but it didn't sort itself out. If anything, it got worse. Sarah began to notice strange sensations during routine activities. When she walked past the motor pool, she could somehow sense the exact distance to various vehicles without using any measuring device. When she ate in the mess hall, she found herself unconsciously calculating the trajectory needed to hit objects across the room. It was as if her brain was constantly processing ballistic information, whether she wanted it to or not. The breaking point came during a live fire exercise with another SEAL team. Sarah was positioned on a hilltop, providing overwatch for a simulated assault on a mock enemy compound. The exercise was routine, with predetermined safe zones and carefully controlled parameters. Nothing was supposed to go wrong, but 20 minutes into the exercise, Sarah's radio crackled with an emergency transmission. One of the SEALs from the assault team had suffered a real injury during the mock assault. A piece of equipment had malfunctioned, and Petty Officer Martinez was down with a serious leg injury in an area that the medical evacuation helicopter couldn't reach safely. "All snipers, we need suppressing fire on the compound to cover the medical evacuation," came the order over the radio. "Targets are the guard towers on the north and east sides." Sarah adjusted her position and looked through her scope at the compound below. The guard towers were clearly marked as training targets, constructed to withstand repeated impacts from training ammunition. But as she lined up her first shot, that familiar, strange feeling washed over her. The distance to the target seemed to fluctuate, appearing much farther away than her rangefinder indicated. She squeezed the trigger, and the training round struck the center of the North Tower target. But something was wrong. The impact was far more violent than it should have been, and she could swear she saw sparks fly from the target even though they were using non-explosive training ammunition. "Nice shot, Martinez," came Jake's voice over the radio, but that looked like a real hit, not a training round impact. Sarah quickly moved to engage the East Tower, but as she lined up the shot, the strange sensation intensified. Through her scope, the tower seemed to be miles away, wavering like a mirage. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. She fired, and this time there was no doubt about what happened. The training target exploded in a shower of sparks and debris, as if it had been hit with a high-explosive round instead of a harmless training bullet. Sarah stared through her scope in horror as pieces of the target rained down on the mock compound below. "All units, cease fire immediately." The voice on the radio was sharp with alarm. "Martinez, what the hell kind of ammunition are you using?" Sarah's hands shook as she checked her rifle. Standard training ammunition. Exactly what everyone else was using. She looked at the remaining rounds in her magazine, and they appeared completely normal. But somehow, when fired from her rifle, they had behaved like something entirely different. The exercise was called off immediately. and Sarah found herself sitting in a briefing room 30 minutes later, facing a panel of senior officers who looked deeply concerned. Her rifle sat on the table in front of them, disassembled and examined by the base's senior armorer. "Petty Officer Martinez," began Colonel Harrison, the base commander. "We need to understand what happened out there. The targets you engaged were completely destroyed, far beyond what training ammunition should be capable of. The armorer has examined your weapon and ammunition, and both appear completely standard. Can you explain what happened?" Sarah knew this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped to have more time to understand what was happening to her first. Now faced with direct questions from her commanding officers, she had to make a choice between lying to protect herself and telling a truth that sounded insane. "Sir, I don't have a complete explanation," Sarah said carefully, "but this isn't the first time something unusual has happened with my shooting." She told them about the Afghanistan mission, about the 2,940-meter shot that should have been impossible. She described the strange, intuitive feeling that guided her aim, and the way distances seemed to shift when she looked through her scope. The officers listened in silence, their expressions growing more concerned with each detail. When she finished, Colonel Harrison leaned back in his chair and studied her for a long moment. "Petty Officer Martinez, what you're describing sounds like either a severe psychological condition or something that falls far outside normal military operations. Either way, we need to understand what's happening." The base psychiatrist, Dr. Karen Walsh, had been taking notes throughout Sarah's account. "Sarah, have you experienced any other unusual sensations or perceptions lately? Changes in sleep patterns, appetite, or general awareness?" Sarah nodded and described the nightmares, the constant ballistic calculations her brain seemed to be making, and the way she could sense distances without measuring them. Dr. Walsh's expression grew increasingly troubled as Sarah spoke. "Colonel, I recommend we suspend Petty Officer Martinez from active duty, pending a complete psychological and medical evaluation," Dr. Walsh said. "What she's describing could indicate a serious neurological condition, possibly brought on by repeated exposure to high-stress combat situations." "But sir," Sarah interrupted, "I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds, but everything I've told you is true. My shooting ability hasn't diminished. If anything, it's become more accurate at extreme ranges. I just don't understand how or why it's happening." Colonel Harrison held up his hand for silence. "Martinez, no one is questioning your sanity or your abilities, but we have a responsibility to ensure the safety of you and your teammates. Until we understand what's happening, you're grounded from combat operations." As Sarah left the briefing room, she felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that she had finally told someone in authority about what was happening, but dread about what would come next. She had heard stories about military personnel who experienced unusual phenomena being transferred to classified research programs, never to be seen again by their former teammates. Chief Burke was waiting for her outside the briefing room. "Sarah, we need to talk. There are some things about these incidents that you need to know, and there are some people who are going to want to meet with you very soon." Chief Burke led Sarah to his private office, a small room filled with sniper manuals, awards, and photographs from decades of military service. He locked the door behind them and gestured for her to sit down while he pulled out a thick, unmarked folder from a hidden compartment in his desk. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. I'm only sharing this because I believe you're in danger, and you need to know what you might be dealing with," Burke said, his voice unusually serious. "That folder of unusual shooting incidents I showed you last month, it represents just the tip of the iceberg." Sarah watched as Burke opened the folder, revealing documents marked with classification stamps she had never seen before. "Chief, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the military has been aware of shooters like you for over 60 years. What you're experiencing isn't unique, and it isn't a medical condition. It's something else entirely, something that certain people in the defense establishment are very interested in studying and potentially exploiting." Burke pulled out a photograph of a man in a Vietnam-era military uniform. "This is Sergeant Thomas Chen, Army sniper, 1968. During the Tet Offensive, Chen made a series of shots that saved his entire platoon from being overrun. Distances ranging from 1,800 to 2,400 meters, using a rifle that shouldn't have been accurate beyond 800 meters. When questioned about it afterward, Chen described the same intuitive aiming process you mentioned. Sarah studied the photograph. Chen looked young, maybe 25, with the 1,000-yard stare she had seen in many combat veterans. What happened to him? He was transferred to a classified research program run by DARPA and the CIA. The program was called Project Longshot, and its purpose was to understand and replicate whatever allowed certain individuals to make impossible shots. Chen spent 3 years in various laboratories and testing facilities, subjected to every kind of analysis you can imagine. Burke pulled out more photographs and documents. Here's Marine Corporal James Rodriguez from the Gulf War, Navy Petty Officer Lisa Park from Somalia, Army Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson from Iraq. All of them experienced the same phenomenon you're experiencing now. All of them were recruited into classified programs. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Recruited, or were they forced to participate? The line between recruitment and conscription tends to get blurry when national security is involved. Burke replied grimly. What I can tell you is that most of these shooters were told they had a patriotic duty to help their country understand and develop their abilities. They were promised they would be helping to save lives and protect American interests. And what actually happened to them? Burke's expression darkened. That's where the official records get thin. Some were released back to regular military service after a few years, but with their memories of the program heavily redacted through a combination of drugs and psychological conditioning. Others simply disappeared from the records entirely. A few had what the files call adverse reactions to the testing protocols. Sarah stood up and began pacing around the small office. Chief, you're telling me that there's a secret government program that kidnaps military snipers and experiments on them? I'm telling you that there are people in the defense and intelligence communities who view individuals like you as potentially invaluable assets for national security. They believe that whatever allows you to make these impossible shots could be the key to developing a new generation of weapon systems or training programs. Burke pulled out a more recent document, this one bearing yesterday's date. Sarah, I received this message through back channels this morning. There's a team from DARPA and Naval Intelligence on their way to this base right now. They're coming to interview you about your recent shooting incidents. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. Can I refuse to talk to them? Can I request a transfer or leave? You can try, but once they're interested in you, options become limited very quickly. These aren't people who accept no for an answer, especially when they believe you might be crucial to national security projects worth billions of dollars. Sarah slumped back into her chair. So what do I do? Run away? Go AWOL? Running would only make things worse. They have resources you can't imagine, and going AWOL would give them legal justification to track you down and bring you back by force. Burke leaned forward, his expression intense. But there might be another option. He pulled out a business card with only a phone number printed on it. This number connects you to a network of former military personnel who have dealt with similar situations. Some are former test subjects from programs like Longshot. Others are intelligence operatives who became disillusioned with these kinds of operations. They might be able to help you disappear in a way that keeps you safe. Sarah stared at the card. And what would that mean for my career? My life? It would mean giving up everything you've worked for in the military, but it might also mean keeping your freedom and your sanity. Burke replied. Sarah, I've seen what these programs can do to people. The few test subjects I've been able to track down afterward were never the same. The ones who were released were shells of their former selves, and the ones who had adverse reactions. He didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. Chief, how do you know all this? Why are you helping me? Burke was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Because 23 years ago, I was in a very similar situation. I was a young Marine sniper in Lebanon when I made a shot that should have been impossible. A 2,100-meter kill that saved my entire squad from a terrorist attack. Sarah's eyes widened. You experienced the same thing I'm experiencing? Not exactly the same, but similar enough. The strange, intuitive aiming, the way distances seemed to shift. The feeling that my rifle was somehow different than it had been before. Burke looked up at her. And like you, I was approached by people from classified programs who wanted to study me. What did you do? I agreed to participate, thinking I was serving my country. I spent 18 months in various facilities, subjected to tests that I can't fully remember due to the drugs they used to manage my memories afterward. When they were done with me, they transferred me back to regular military service, but I was never the same. Burke rolled up his sleeves, revealing a series of small scars on his forearms. These are from the implants they used to monitor my neurological activity during testing. The scars from the psychological testing aren't visible, but they're still there. Sarah stared at the scars, understanding now why Burke had been so knowledgeable about unusual shooting incidents and why he had access to classified documents. How did you get the files? How do you know about the other test subjects? After I recovered from the worst of the psychological conditioning, I made it my mission to find out what had been done to me and to help others who might face the same situation. Over the years, I've built a network of contacts in the intelligence community who share information about these programs. A knock on the office door interrupted their conversation. Burke quickly gathered up the classified documents and returned them to his hidden compartment. "Come in," he called. A young corporal entered the room. "Chief Colonel Harrison wants to see you and Petty Officer Martinez in the briefing room immediately. There are some visitors here to see her." Sarah felt her heart sink. The DARPA team had arrived sooner than expected. Burke caught her eye and nodded slightly toward the business card, which he had slipped under some papers on his desk. The message was clear. Take the card and be prepared to make a choice that would change her life forever. "Tell the colonel we'll be right there, Corporal," Burke said calmly, but as the young Marine left, he turned to Sarah with an expression of urgency. "Whatever they offer you, whatever they promise you, remember that once you're in their system, getting out becomes nearly impossible. Make your choice carefully, because it might be the last real choice you get to make." The briefing room had been transformed since Sarah's last visit. Instead of the usual military personnel, 3 civilians in expensive suits sat at the conference table, their briefcases and laptops suggesting they were prepared for a lengthy discussion. Colonel Harrison stood at attention near the door, but his expression suggested he was not entirely comfortable with whatever was happening. "Petty Officer Martinez, please have a seat," said the woman at the head of the table. She appeared to be in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of Sarah's appearance. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw from DARPA's Advanced Weapons Research Division. These are my colleagues, Dr. James Liu from Naval Intelligence and Mr. Robert Kane from the Defense Intelligence Agency." Sarah sat down, acutely aware of the business card she had slipped into her pocket moments earlier. She tried to appear calm and professional, but her heart was racing with the knowledge of what these people likely wanted from her. "We've reviewed your recent shooting incidents, both in Afghanistan and during the training exercise," Dr. Crenshaw continued, opening a tablet computer. "Your performance falls far outside normal parameters for human marksmanship, even accounting for your exceptional training and experience." Dr. Liu leaned forward, consulting his own notes. "The Afghanistan shot in particular represents ballistic performance that shouldn't be possible with standard equipment and ammunition. We've run computer simulations based on the environmental conditions and weapon specifications, and the probability of success for such a shot is essentially 0. Sarah remained silent, waiting to see where this conversation was heading. Chief Burke's warnings echoed in her mind, along with the images of those scars on his arms. Petty Officer Martinez, Mr. Kane, spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "We believe you may possess a unique neurological capability that could be of tremendous value to national security. We'd like to invite you to participate in a research program that could help us understand and potentially replicate your abilities." "What kind of research program?" Sarah asked, proud that her voice remained steady. Dr. Crenshaw smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "You would be transferred to a specialized facility where our best neuroscientists and ballistics experts could study your abilities in a controlled environment. We're particularly interested in understanding the neurological processes that allow you to make these extraordinary shots. Would I still be in the Navy? Would I still be a SEAL? You would retain your military rank and status, but you would be assigned to our program on a temporary duty basis," Dr. Liu replied. The duration would depend on how quickly we can understand and document your abilities. Probably 6 months to a year. Sarah noticed that none of them had mentioned the other shooters who had experienced similar phenomena, or what had happened to those individuals. Have you worked with other military snipers who have experienced similar abilities? The three researchers exchanged quick glances before Dr. Crenshaw answered. We have conducted research with a small number of individuals who demonstrated unusual marksmanship capabilities, yes. Each case has provided valuable insights into the limits of human performance. What happened to those individuals? Are they still participating in your program? That information is classified, Mr. Kane said curtly. What I can tell you is that all participants have contributed significantly to our understanding of enhanced human performance in combat situations. Sarah felt a chill at his evasive response. And if I choose not to participate? Dr. Liu leaned back in his chair. Petty Officer Martinez, you have to understand that what you've demonstrated represents a potential breakthrough in military technology. The ability to make accurate shots at ranges previously thought impossible could revolutionize modern warfare. We're not just asking for your cooperation. We're asking you to serve your country in a new and important way. That's not really an answer to my question, Sarah pressed. What happens if I refuse? The silence in the room stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Mr. Kane spoke with the tone of someone delivering an ultimatum disguised as advice. The Navy SEAL program requires absolute trust between teammates and complete confidence in each individual's abilities. If there are questions about a SEAL's mental state or reliability, it could affect their security clearance, their team assignments, even their fitness for continued service. The threat was clear without being explicitly stated. Cooperate or face the destruction of her military career through bureaucratic channels that would be impossible to fight. I need time to think about this, Sarah said. Of course, Dr. Crenshaw replied, though her smile suggested that delay was merely a formality. We'll need your decision by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, you'll be confined to base for security reasons. After the researchers left, Colonel Harrison remained in the room with Sarah. His expression was troubled, and he waited until he was sure they were alone before speaking. Martinez, I want you to know that I wasn't consulted about this meeting or these arrangements. These people arrived with orders from Pentagon-level authority that I'm not in a position to question. Sir, what's your assessment of their program? Colonel Harrison was quiet for a moment, clearly wrestling with how much he could say without compromising his own position. Off the record, I've heard rumors about similar programs over the years. The results for the participants haven't always been positive. If you have any alternatives to consider, I would suggest you consider them carefully. Sarah left the briefing room with her mind racing. She had less than 18 hours to make a decision that would determine the rest of her life. The business card in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. That evening, Sarah found herself alone in her quarters, staring at her M2010 rifle. The weapon that had started this entire ordeal now seemed like both a blessing and a curse. She disassembled it one more time, looking for any clue about what made it special, what allowed it to perform impossibly accurate shots. As she examined the bolt assembly under a magnifying glass, she noticed something she had missed before. Etched into the metal, almost invisible unless viewed at exactly the right angle, were a series of tiny symbols. They looked like letters, but in no alphabet she recognized. The markings were so small and faint that they could easily have been mistaken for normal wear patterns or manufacturing marks. Sarah photographed the symbols with her phone and then reassembled the rifle. Whatever those markings meant, they were the first concrete evidence that her weapon might actually be different from a standard M2010. But with the DARPA team waiting for her answer tomorrow morning, she wasn't sure if this discovery would help her or make her situation even more dangerous. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on Chief Burke's business card. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered, "This is Sarah Martinez. Chief Burke gave me this number." "We've been expecting your call," the woman replied. "Are you in immediate danger?" "I have until tomorrow morning to make a decision. There are people here who want to take me to a research facility." "Where are you located?" Sarah provided her base information, and the woman was quiet for several moments. "We can have someone there to extract you within 6 hours. But once we do this, there's no going back. You'll need to disappear completely from your current life. New identity, new location, new everything. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah looked around her quarters at the life she had built over 8 years in the Navy. Her awards and commendations, photographs with her SEAL team, the rifle that had made her one of the most respected snipers in special operations. All of it would have to be left behind. But then she thought about Chief Burke's scars, about the other snipers who had disappeared into classified programs and emerged as broken shells of their former selves. She thought about Dr. Crenshaw's cold smile and Mr. Kane's barely veiled threats. "Yes," Sarah said quietly. "I'm prepared. Pack light and be ready to move at 0300 hours. Someone will contact you with extraction details. And, Sarah, destroy this phone after we hang up. From this moment forward, your old life is over." As Sarah hung up the phone and began to prepare for the most difficult decision of her life, she took one last look at her rifle. Whatever secrets it held, whatever had caused her to make those impossible shots, she would have to discover them on her own terms, rather than as a test subject in a government laboratory. The next few hours would determine whether she could escape the web that was closing around her, or whether she would become another classified file in someone else's collection of unusual shooting incidents. At exactly 02:45 hours, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message containing only coordinates and the word maintenance. She had spent the last few hours destroying any evidence of her research into the strange markings on her rifle and packing a single small backpack with essential items. Her M2010 lay disassembled in its case, and she made the painful decision to leave it behind. Taking it would only invite more questions and make her easier to track. The coordinates led her to a maintenance shed on the far side of the base, well away from the main buildings and guard posts. Sarah moved through the shadows, using skills learned in countless night operations, but this time she was the one trying to evade detection rather than infiltrate enemy territory. The shed door was unlocked, and inside she found a woman in her 40s wearing civilian clothes and night vision goggles. "Sarah Martinez?" "Yes, I'm Agent Catherine Ross, but you can call me Kate. I used to be Army intelligence until I learned too much about programs like the one you're trying to avoid." Kate handed Sarah a small device that looked like a modified radio. "This will scramble any tracking signals from devices you might be carrying. Phone, fitness tracker, anything electronic." Sarah activated the device and immediately felt a strange sense of isolation as it blocked all communications with the outside world. "How do we get off the base without being detected?" "There's a supply convoy leaving in 20 minutes. We've arranged for you to hide in one of the trucks until it reaches the civilian gate." Kate led Sarah to a small opening in the back wall of the shed. "But first, I need to know exactly what you can remember about your unusual shooting experiences. Every detail might be important." As they waited for the convoy, Sarah described everything she could remember about the impossible shots, the strange sensations and the mysterious markings she had discovered on her rifle. Kate listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification about specific details. "Sarah, what you're describing matches reports from at least 15 other military snipers over the past 60 years. The program that wants to study you has been trying to understand and replicate these abilities for decades, but they've never made real progress. Why not? Because they're approaching it like a mechanical problem, trying to find technological explanations for what might be something else entirely." Kate checked her watch and gestured toward the shed's rear door. "The convoy should be passing by soon. Are you ready to leave your old life behind?" Sarah nodded, though part of her still couldn't believe she was about to become a fugitive from her own government. "What happens now?" "Where do I go?" "There's a safe house in Montana where you can stay while we arrange a new identity. It's run by a former Marine sniper who went through a similar experience in Iraq. He can help you understand what you're dealing with better than any government scientist." They slipped out of the shed and moved toward a dirt road where a line of military supply trucks was approaching. Kate signaled with a small flashlight, and the third truck in the convoy pulled over just long enough for Sarah to climb into the back among crates of supplies. As the truck carried her away from the base and the life she had known for 8 years, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and relief. She was free from the government researchers, but she was also completely alone and cut off from everything familiar. The gentle rocking of the truck and the sound of the engine were almost hypnotic, and despite everything, she found herself drifting towards sleep. She was awakened by the truck stopping and voices outside. They had reached the civilian gate, and Sarah could hear the driver joking with the guards about early morning supply runs. After a few minutes, the truck resumed moving, and Sarah knew she had successfully escaped the base. An hour later, the truck stopped at a rest area, and Kate appeared at the rear doors. "First phase complete. There's a car waiting to take you to the airport. The next several hours passed in a blur of small airports, charter flights, and careful route changes designed to make tracking impossible. By sunset, Sarah found herself standing outside a rustic cabin in the mountains of Montana, surrounded by wilderness that stretched for miles in every direction. The door opened and a man in his 50s emerged. He walked with a slight limp, and Sarah could see old battle scars on his arms and face. But his eyes were alert and intelligent, lacking the broken look she had seen in some combat veterans. "You must be Sarah." "I'm Frank Morrison, former Marine Corps sniper, and according to the government, I'm officially dead." He gestured for her to come inside. "Kate told me about your situation. I went through something very similar 12 years ago in Iraq." The cabin's interior was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and walls lined with books on subjects ranging from physics to philosophy. Frank poured 2 cups of coffee and settled into a chair across from Sarah. "The 2,940-meter shot," he said without preamble. "Tell me about the moment you pulled the trigger. Not the technical details, but what you felt internally." Sarah described the strange intuitive sensation, the way the distance seemed to shift, and the feeling that her rifle had somehow become an extension of her consciousness, rather than just a tool. Frank nodded thoughtfully. "In Iraq, I made a 2,600-meter shot that saved my entire squad from an ambush. Same sensations you described, same impossible physics. But here's what the government researchers never figured out. It's not about the rifle or the ammunition or any kind of technology. Then what is it? It's about consciousness, about the connection between human awareness and the physical world around us. There are documented cases throughout history of people performing impossible physical feats during moments of extreme stress or need. Mothers lifting cars off their children. People surviving falls that should have been fatal. And yes, shooters making shots that defy ballistic physics." Frank stood up and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a worn journal. "I've spent the last 12 years researching this phenomenon, talking to other people who've experienced similar things. What I've found suggests that human consciousness has capabilities that mainstream science doesn't recognize or understand." Sarah flipped through the journal, seeing pages of notes, calculations, and testimonials from dozens of individuals who had experienced various forms of impossible physical performance. "So you think this is some kind of psychic ability?" "I think it's a natural human capability that most people never access because they never encounter the specific conditions that trigger it. Extreme stress, life or death situations, absolute necessity, and complete focus seem to be the common factors." Frank returned to his chair and looked at Sarah seriously. "But here's the important question. Now that you know you can do this, what do you want to do with that knowledge?" Sarah had been so focused on escaping the government researchers that she hadn't considered what would come next. "I don't know. I just want to understand what's happening to me. Understanding is good, but it's not enough. The people you ran away from aren't going to stop looking for you just because you disappeared. They'll keep searching, and eventually they'll find other people with similar abilities. The question is whether you want to help those people avoid the same fate you almost suffered." Frank pulled out a laptop computer and showed Sarah a secure website that looked like a cross between a scientific journal and an underground newsletter. "This is how we communicate with others who've experienced unusual capabilities. There are dozens of us around the world, maybe hundreds. We share information, warn each other about government interest, and try to help people who are just discovering their abilities." Sarah read through several posts, recognizing the same confusion and fear she had experienced. "So this is my life now? Hiding and helping other people hide?" "It doesn't have to be just hiding," Frank replied. "Some of us are working to document these phenomena scientifically, on our own terms. Others are developing training methods to help people access these abilities safely. A few are even working within the system, trying to change how the government approaches these issues." Sarah closed the laptop and stared out the window at the vast Montana wilderness. "Frank, that marking I found on my rifle, the symbols I couldn't identify. Do you think they mean anything?" Frank's expression became very serious. "Describe them to me." Sarah sketched the symbols she remembered on a piece of paper. Frank studied them for a long moment, then walked to another bookshelf and pulled down a different journal. "Sarah, I think you may have discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about this phenomenon." He opened the journal to a page covered with similar symbols. These markings have been found on weapons and equipment associated with impossible performance events throughout history. We always assumed they were random manufacturing marks or wear patterns. But you don't think that anymore? I think someone or some group has been deliberately placing these symbols on certain weapons, possibly for centuries. And I think they might be the key to understanding how and why some people can transcend normal physical limitations. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying that my ability to make those impossible shots wasn't natural? That someone did something to my rifle? Frank closed the journal and looked at her with an expression of excitement mixed with concern. I'm saying that your escape from that government program might have been even more important than we realized. Because if these symbols are what I think they are, then you're not just a person with unusual abilities. You might be the key to understanding a mystery that goes back hundreds of years. As night fell over the Montana wilderness, Sarah realized that her journey into the impossible was just beginning. The 2,940-meter shot that had started everything was not an ending, but a doorway into a world where the boundaries between science and the impossible had become blurred beyond recognition.